There's a lot of videos now that talk about the neck, especially with upper cervical chiropractic and how that relates to dizziness, but I want to clarify a couple of things about what's really happening with this. So this is your vestibular organ. So this is basically what sits inside of your inner ear. And the vestibular organ has these things called semicircular canals, and this part is called the otolith, and that's where it gives us our sense of balance and equilibrium. Over on this side, this is where you have your hearing apparatus, and that's where we can hear things. So this nerve right over here is called the vestibular branch of the vestibular cochlear nerve. So that's a nerve that comes out of your brainstem. It goes into your inner ear. One branch goes into the hearing part of the ear, and another branch goes into the balance part of the ear. A lot of videos are saying that this vestibular nerve that controls our balance is probably what's implicated when someone gets an adjustment and helps to clear up their dizziness and balance. But I'm here to say that this is probably not the case. So here's a cervical MRI, and then what we're working with in the upper cervical chiropractic is this upper part over here called your upper cervical spine. So that's C1 at the top, here's C2, C3, C4 all the way down. Here's your spinal cord. And as we follow the spinal cord up, it goes up into this little brainstem structure, and right over here is where your vestibulocochlear nerve sits. So there's a pretty sizable gap between where your C1 vertebrae is and where your brainstem is. So a very tiny misalignment of that upper cervical vertebrae is probably not displacing or doing anything significant into this area of the brainstem. The truth is probably way more interesting because it opens up a lot of avenues for how we can help a dizzy patient. The brain is constantly monitoring and making adjustments to our orientation in space using our eyes for our visual sense, our inner ear for vestibular, and also use proprioception heavily driven by the cervical spine. It ends up creating a multi-sensory processing experience to help us give a totality of what's going on with our head in space. So based on what we are seeing, what we are feeling with our inner ear, and what our neck muscles are doing, it is going to give us a different motor response in terms of how we are moving our legs, our trunk, and our head. All three of these things work together to make sure that our eyes are moving accurately, that our head is moving accurately, and that our posture is reacting appropriately to the world around us. And all of this happens with the neck being at the center of it all, which means it's like the linchpin that holds all of these things together. And many of these things are happening at a reflex level, which means we don't have to think about it in order to make all this stuff work. But that also means when something happens, like we take an injury to the neck, then the linchpin, the place that holds all this stuff together, can interfere with all these reflexes. And when those reflexes break down, then our brain no longer has a great orientation of where we are in space. When it comes to a complex sensory motor experience like dizziness, we got to think less like a garden hose getting kinked and think more like software that needs to be reprogrammed.